Hi everyone and welcome to this week's presentation. My name is Eleanor and today Cormac, Naomi and myself will be presenting on Joshua Oppenheimer's 2012 documentary The Act of Killing. If you've not yet had a chance to watch the film, we'd like to extend a content warning, as the film does portray quite graphic reenactments of killings and violence. As mentioned, the film was directed by Joshua Oppenheimer and co-directed by Christine Chin and an anonymous Indonesian filmmaker. The film was shot predominantly in northern Sumatra, Indonesia, over a 6-year period between 2005 and 2011. The Act of Killing explores the mass killings of communists in Indonesia in the 1960s. Between 1965 and 1966, it's estimated between 500,000 and 1 million communists and other ethnic minorities were murdered by the Indonesian army and various death squads, namely the Pancasila Youth Paramilitary, of which the film focuses on. The communist killings took place under the tense political climate of the Cold War, and was openly condoned by Western powers such as the USA and the UK. The self-proclaimed purge was ordered by Army Commander and future President Suharto, after a failed coup in which 6 senior army generals were killed by dissatisfied military officers. The government blamed the coup on the PKI, or Indonesian Communist Party, and henceforth triggered the beginning of the political genocide. To this day, discussions of the killings are considered a taboo, and are generally skipped over in Indonesian histories and school textbooks. There has never been a formal apology for the genocide, and the events are not only condoned but often celebrated in present-day Indonesia for its influence on the expansion of capitalism for the nation.
In a 2013 interview with the Academy Awards Academic Conversations, Oppenheimer detailed his journey toward producing The Act of Killing. Working alongside Christine Chin for the eventual 2003 documentary The Globalization Tapes, the pair were already in North Sumatra in 2001, interviewing palm oil plantation workers about their struggles to achieve unionization. Hearing of stories of workers' parents being killed as suspected communists due to union membership, and thus fearing joining unions themselves, the pair were directed to speak with notorious gangsters and militiamen in the region. In 2005, Oppenheimer would meet Anwar Congo, the 41st gangster Oppenheimer recorded meeting, who was the first gangster to strike him as being haunted. Working with esteemed documentary filmmakers Werner Herzog and Errol Morris as executive producers, Oppenheimer and Chin provided select Medan gangsters the opportunity to reenact their killings from the 60s, filming not only their stage plays and acts, but also their decision-making processes and ultimately, Anwar Congo's psychological break at the end of the film. Behind the scenes, however, many of the film crew, including the anonymous Indonesian co-director, had to maintain anonymity even for the credits due to fear of reprisal. These fears proved warranted as some theatre owners hosting private screenings received death threats, and a gathering held for victims' families in Yogyakarta was assaulted by the Indonesian Anti-Communist Front, resulting in 3 injuries.
Throughout the Act of Killing, there are many issues and problems that are worth analyzing. Here are some of the most important issues that were raised by the subject matter of the film. The first one is the gangsters presenting trouble in excess of themselves. This issue is developed as the documentary process. The gangsters, specifically Anwar, was first happily and proudly talking about his killing, but as he was reliving the past, we can see that he was deeply traumatized and troubled, indicating that he was suffering from PTSD. The second issue is the politics of gangsterism. In Melbourne, gangsters hold a high position in the government and have a close association with the paramilitary Pemuda Pancasila, which is a powerful organization used by the Suharto regime to kill communists. The power of which the gangsters hold suggests another issue in the movie, which is impunity. Seeing how the perpetrators are feared by society despite what they did and welcomed by the people in the government, emphasize that they were killing with impunity from the law. The last issue is how history is painted by perpetrators. Most of the time, people make movies to tell stories of the victims. Yet in The Act of Killing, Oppenheimer went the complete opposite path by letting the killers tell the story. Through imaginative reenactments, the killers get to tell stories of their own and how they view history. As we engage with the film, we can see a different point of view on a genocide, and thus compare it with how society views killers, and also compare it with movies that are based on victim testimonial.
Throughout the course of The Act of Killing, we see examples of multiple documentary modes. The first of which is the participatory mode, which, according to Nichols, features engagement between the filmmaker and subjects to draw them out in revealing ways and to develop a story or perspective. While the filmmakers don't visually participate in this film, Oppenheimer's presence and influence on the documentary can be easily acknowledged through verbal communication and eye contact in interviews with the subjects, where he clearly has control of the questions and the subsequent direction of the film. Secondly, elements of the reflexive mode are found in both the act of killing as a whole, as well as the film the gangsters are making. Nichols states that reflexive documentaries ask us to see documentary for what it is, a construct or representation. We see this throughout the film as Anwar Congo and Adizul Kadri spend time perfecting the acting and direction of their film. Additionally, in a scene depicting the Bermuda burning down a communist village, the head of the Bermuda asked that the scene be reshot to show the communists humanely exterminated, because it could be bad for the public image of the group to show the realistic version. These scenes in the film provoke the audience to consider the notion of truth and representation in documentary. An implication of the participatory mode is that it can manipulate or goad others into confessions or actions they may regret. Questions of manipulation and distortion arise. This is particularly stressed in the act of killing, as it highlights war criminals who have never been reprimanded for their actions. Reports suggest Anwar and Herman were initially supportive of the film once completed, however later felt betrayed after the film was negatively received in Indonesia and adversely affected their lives. The implication of the reflexive form can use or abuse subjects to pose questions that are those of the filmmakers and not the subjects. This implication has a profound impact in the act of killing, as the questions posed by the filmmaker to Anwar contribute to somewhat of an emotional breakdown for the murderer, in which his sentiments towards his actions completely change, which may not have occurred if it weren't for the film.
In her paper Unruly Artivism and the Participatory Documentary Ecology of the Act of Killing, Camilla Reeshoff asserts that the act of killing can be interpreted as an unruly artivist practice situated in a complex participatory documentary ecosystem. Reeshoff continues that, by allowing the gangsters to tell their story, the film becomes participatory, and in its enunciation, it figures a conflicted interpretation of history. Reeshoff concludes by declaring that the film is stuck within an ethical dilemma between commemorating the victims and allowing for the story of genocide to be told. As previously mentioned, there were real-life pressures behind Oppenheimer's choice to follow the story of the perpetrators rather than the victims. Though Oppenheimer did find Anwar Congo uniquely fascinating, the choice to eschew victims' voices wasn't a heartless move, as showing victims on screen can, and most likely would, have led to legitimate threats to the lives of both these social actors and their relatives. The choice of the gangsters as the social actors, in addition to how gangsters were framed by the filmmakers of the act of killing, are the foundation of Reeshoff's thesis. The morality of providing the gangsters creative control over their productions has been called into question by academics, such as Sarah Candle, who labelled the decision to give the perpetrators authorial control over the narratives they would tell as a concession, which raises questions about the ethics of this form of representation. Grant Kester expands on this notion, adding, any participatory practice that aims to collaborate and work together carries with it a counter-meaning, a warning, so to speak, of its ethical undecidability.
Looking at the act of killing, the perpetrators seem to have control over what stories they want to tell and portray. Viewers can only sometimes hear Oppenheimer interviewing others, and he almost never voices his opinions. By scripting and staging the performance, these killers all go through an emotional journey and have different reactions. Anwar was definitely the most memorable character, as he was the only one who showed a side of remorse when the others appear to be not as emotionally affected. However, there are people who are skeptical about the authenticity of the performance, specifically in the last scene where Anwar is surrounded by terror, which many see as a result of drama therapy and self-reflection. Others think this is merely performing. Whichever is the case here, the impact of the film I think still remains the same when we look at the whole film. In the documentary, although we rarely hear the voice of the victims, we can still see images of them being portrayed. There are scenes where social actors play the victims, such as in the burning of the village scene or when Anwar role reversed as well. Moreover, the scenes where Suryano, who is Anwar's neighbor, tells the story of how his stepfather was murdered was unforgettable, as we see the social actors' daily expressions after filming the scene in the village or hear the story of the victim's family. The cruelty of the killers and their crimes are exposed. With the perpetrators as the storyteller, the communists are the ones being tortured and treated horribly, which is completely different from the images in propaganda films that were shown under the Suharto regime.
The film provides the audience with many opportunities for critical reflection. Foremost, viewers of the film should approach the act of killing with a willingness to disregard their own ethnocentric tendencies, meaning it's vital to acknowledge the political and social context of Indonesia at the time without comparison to Western norms. Secondly, like with all documentary modes, the audience has the obligation to regard the act of killing as an account of history by only one of its key players. Although, at its root, the film does focus on the social actors' core sentiments regarding their actions, they still reveal many details about the occurrences of the genocide. Hence, it's vital that the audience do not take these revelations as the whole truth, particularly considering it precludes the incorporation of a communist point of view. Given the context of the act of killing, where the social actors present have never been reprimanded for their actions, it should be noted that they do have a motive for hiding the entire truth of the events in an attempt to avoid incriminating themselves. Finally, it's beneficial for the audience to be mindful of the interaction of Oppenheimer and the social actors. Audience members should consider how the filmmakers and gangsters respond to each other, and whether there is a sense of mutual respect between each other, or conversely, a feeling of deception or manipulation. Taking these details into account will allow the audience to conclude how much Oppenheimer has manipulated the film's content.
The act of killing has proven to be a definitive hit both with audiences and critics, despite its commercial failure. The film holds an 8.2 rating on IMDb, an audience score of 85% on Rotten Tomatoes alongside its 95% critic rating, and a score of 91 on Metacritic, denoting critical acclaim. The film was also nominated for 64 international awards, including Best Documentary Feature at the 86 Academy Awards, and won 40 of these nominations, namely the 2013 BAFTA for Best Documentary. In his glowing review for Truthdig, journalist Chris Hedges labelled the film an important exploration of the complex psychology of mass murderers, likening the act of killing to the Geta Sereni book Into That Darkness, an examination of conscience, which similarly explored the psychology of Treblinka commander Franz Stangl. Some journalists such as Mike McGranahan, writing for Film Racket, offered criticism, however, writing that having these men reenact their crimes in a style of various cinematic genres often trivialises what they did, particularly in reference to the Born Free waterfall musical acts. McGranahan continues, saying, "It feels wrong to let them turn their heinous actions into a game they are often visibly enjoying." Despite reviews like McGranahan's, the vast majority of critical response was positive, though this could not save the film at the box office. Made on an estimated budget of $1 million according to IMDb, the film came away with a worldwide gross of $726,000, and only making $27,000 on its opening American weekend.
The act of killing is constructed around imaginative reenactments of the past and footage of the present. The reenactments that were staged either for the documentary itself or for Anwar and his friends' movie were very diverse as they were based on many film genres such as musical, cowboy, and many more. Oppenheimer included many performances that were staged for Anwar's movie in the act of killing, thus representing the meta-thematic film within the film technique. The reenactments in the film serve many purposes. Here we'll be looking at the last scene in the movie, where Anwar played a communist and was being tortured by Herman. This stage performance was inspired by film noir and gangster movie. The performance, which is based on story of the killers, not only showed their cruelty in the past, but also became a tool for self-reflection. We can see that Anwar had a hard time filming this scene, and later when he watched the scene on the screen, he looked traumatized, saying that he felt what the people he tortures felt. Anwar was deep with trouble when reliving the past, thus making him become the trouble index of himself. Oppenheimer explained that by using these dramatic reenactments and performance, he allowed the killers to materialize their experience and begin to acknowledge their significance. Through the reenactments, we see that the perpetrators use their own fantasies and stories in order to live with themselves.
To conclude, we would like to ask you, the audience, 3 ethical questions regarding the act of killing. 1. Does the film glorify violence at all? Can violent films such as this one encourage people to commit extreme acts? 2. Can the act of killing truly claim to be a film for the victims even if it omits their voices? And 3. Do you think that the aesthetic presentation and fictional narrative have misleading effects regarding depicting acts of violence and the experience of suffering? And with those questions, our assignment is brought to a close. We hope you enjoyed both the act of killing and our presentation. If you have any questions to ask us, we will be available at Friday's tutorial. Thank you for watching.